Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Personal Trainers Who Care podcast. My name is Riley and I am the Director of Social Media and Marketing at Freeform Fitness, and I am so excited to share this first episode with you. So what is the Personal Trainers Who Care podcast all about? Well, in this podcast, we hope to share the stories of our personal trainers, because at the core of every great fitness business are the individuals who truly care about helping their clients realize their full health potential. This show is a production of Freeform Fitness, a boutique-style personal training studio with 6 locations across Ottawa, Canada. And we service our clients both online and in studio when we are not in lockdowns. If you'd like to know more about our personal training services, you can head to freeformfitness.ca. All right, let's get on with the show. All right, so welcome everybody to this first episode of the Personal Trainers Who Care podcast. Our first guest is Jesse, and he's a personal trainer and holistic lifestyle coach at our Byward Market location. He's been with us since 2015. It was the last few days of 2015, but it still counts. He has certifications from the C.H.E.K Institute, Westside Barbell, Precision Nutrition, and he's also a pre- and postnatal training specialist. And when he's not working with us at the Byward Market, he's training clients online and at the Almont Fitness Center under the business name Thrive Performance. And an interesting fact, Jesse has a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he is currently dating a former Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. So Jesse, welcome to the show.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for the nice intro.
Yeah, well, we're trying. All right, so let's start where all things do at the beginning. So let's talk about what really got you interested in going in your personal training career. I was reading on your website that you started off running and you were a cyclist for a little bit. So tell me about how that sort of led you to the world of personal training.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always like an active kid growing up, and high school sports and this and that, nothing like too serious. At one point I decided I wanted to like dedicate a decent amount of my time and energy into getting really good at one sport. And I had done a little bit of everything. I was a decent runner, so I said, well, let's do something like an Ironman or a marathon. And I kind of thought that running a marathon was like the epitome of the best athletes in the world. And so I started logging like a lot of miles running and biking. At the same time, I was kind of doing this vegetarian vegan diet experiment. And so I think with the two of those things combined, it kind of started to redline my body a little bit. And I started breaking down with injuries. I couldn't recover properly. So that was probably the first thing that kind of sent me on the path of starting to learn a little bit more about my body. And I mean, day one, it's kind of like, you just follow the Canadian food guide, and then it's like, stretch after running and drink lots of water and just kind of like the really basic generic advice. And I was pretty lucky. I had a friend who was a personal trainer, and she had taken a few C.H.E.K Institute courses, and I'd kind of watched a few videos and kind of like what the guy had to say. So I started taking a few of those courses, really, really basic, like weekend stuff, 1 week long at a time, and just slowly started like implementing, these changes into my life. And a lot of little things here and there, but eventually it kind of pulled me away from long distance running and, vegan diets and any kind of like crazy fitness stuff. I kind of like started to pull away from a little bit and kind of have a little bit more of a balanced approach. And then from there, like once you go down that rabbit hole, it goes deep. And from there, I just got really interested. And once I was able to kind of get my body on track, friends ask you questions like, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And it was a lot of fun just kind of helping people out. So I decided just to kind of take a dive and start to do it as a career. And once I started that, it's the whole world opens up, and there's so many certs and things you can do. And once you start working with people, you're like, oh, okay, so I need a certification now to help these folks. And then a lot of my clients were having families, and I'm like, oh, okay, so now how do I train women who are, in the prenatal phase, and how do I train women that are pregnant, and how do you help them, postpartum? And so yeah, that was kind of the first thing. And I have a thirst for knowledge. So I'm constantly studying and taking courses and listening to podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
Nice. Wow. That is impressive. I mean, this is part of the reason why I wanted you as the first guest, is because I know from working with you that you are constantly taking certifications. And I mean, do you know how many certifications you have right now, like a number?
Yeah, I mean, like probably 30 or 35. Now, I mean, that's not to say that like, this is not like these are not all like 1 year long courses, right? So some of them are pretty simple, right? You might just, expose yourself to some sort of weightlifting coach for a 3-day seminar, and some of them are going to be more advanced depending on what you do. But I usually try and do about 4 or 5 a year.
Wow. Wow. That is impressive. But the C.H.E.K Institute, that was the very first step towards becoming a
Yeah.
coach. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
and that certification is it in California? Do you take it online?
Well, I'm sure now with COVID, you can probably take it online, but they were pretty big on assessing what you know. So at the time, I had done like their exercise coach cert and their nutrition cert. So you have to. I did them in California just because I wanted to travel, so I took advantage of that. But yeah, they're pretty rigorous on the testing at the time. So like they run you through the whole workout. It's a little bit more advanced than kind of like your weekend trainer cert. So yeah, I did those all in person, and those are usually about a week at a time. And I went up pretty high up in their certification program. As I grew, my interests also grew and changed. And so I kind of put some of that training on pause to take on some other stuff. And, every year as a trainer, you learn different things, and your approach will start to change slightly here and there. So, I mean, that's where a good chunk of my training came from, and that's where I started. But since then, I've kind of branched off into a few different avenues.
Yeah. And speaking of branching off, I do want to touch on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I remember when I was working with you, it was a pretty big part of your life. You were training pretty regularly for it. I imagine due to COVID, that's potentially had to slow down a little bit. But what in your journey, away from the extremes of veganism and marathons and all of that stuff, sort of led you to choose Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as like your recreational activity?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good question. And I mean, I'm probably like, I've been training for a lot of years, and like, it's almost probably embarrassing how long I've trained compared to like what I can do, but I've been a very like on and off again jiu-jitsu guy. You know what I mean? No, I mean, I think as a male, you're always wrestling with your friends. I remember wrestling with my dad, my uncle. It's just like guys like to fight and roll around and do all this stuff, right? And I had absolutely zero knowledge on any martial arts of anything. Like I thought like karate was like the thing to take, right? So I just like Googled, what are the best martial arts? And you get, zeroed in on these articles. And basically it came down to like, okay, like you're either going to do wrestling or jiu-jitsu as a ground portion, and then you're going to do either like boxing or kickboxing as like a stand-up portion. So I just Googled, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, Carlton Place, and I was super lucky. There was a club that offered both right in town. And so I just like went in, signed up, and that was kind of my first foray into martial arts. I was pretty lucky. I got like the best ones right off the bat. I didn't have to like navigate the world of weird fringe martial arts and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, I met my girlfriend from there. So she's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and probably one of the most decorated male or female competitors from Canada. Yeah, so we met there, and I've been training there ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. And do you find that your training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like, has that influenced any of your training with clients? Like, do you bring any of the disciplines from the martial arts or just the coaching styles from martial arts into your own coaching with your clients? Does that ever happen?
Oh, I'm sure it does for sure. I'm pretty lucky. My coach is fantastic. And, I credit a lot of like what I've learned from there to help me like through my career, and especially with the last 12 months with like COVID and just like gyms being shut down and all this kind of stuff. Right. It's, and I think like martial arts or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in particular is like, it's really good to like help you overcome all the other stuff in your life, and especially when you compete, like how you are doing in your life is like a direct representation of how well you do in like a competition or in training or whatever. So yeah, no, I've been pretty fortunate, and I'm sure like I mimic a lot of the things that my coach does, you know what I mean? Because it makes sense, right? So it's like, why reinvent the wheel, right? So, and even before martial arts, like he's been a personal trainer, he's owned a gym, so like he knows the industry really well also. So it's kind of cool to like kind of merge those together and kind of do my own coaching style based on some of the things I learned there.
Oh, that's really cool. And with everything being shut down over the last 12 months, have you and your girlfriend like been able to practice jujitsu? Is that something that you've been doing to help keep you guys active during this time?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, martial arts clubs maybe have been hit harder than gyms in this whole thing, right? And especially with something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like the really cool thing is you get to learn a move, but then you get to like actually apply it in class, in rolling, to like actually test it, right? So that's hard because the regulations don't really allow that right now. Now, that being said, I live with my girlfriend who's a black belt, so we're always wrestling and rolling, and everyone's always going for a takedown constantly. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not as much training as we'd like. And when lessons are back on, there's a lot of solo drills and stuff, which is good because I always skip a lot of the technique work, which is what I really need to focus on. So yeah, you kind of just make do with what you have. And we've got like a small place here, so it's not like we have a lot of room to set up mats or anything like that, but we definitely wrestle quite a bit.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that's made the last 12 months a little bit more fun than it would be just sitting around the house doing nothing.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So when we fight, we really fight.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine what that would be like. Brazilian black belt jiu-jitsu. Gosh. Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, and in your Instagram bio, there is an interesting line there that talks about ancestral living. And so I just wanted to pick your brain about ancestral living because you've introduced this talking about how you were doing a little bit of veganism and that style of dieting. But how has ancestral living sort of been incorporated into your life?
Yeah, I mean, and this is such a loaded kind of phrase now too, but like I was super fortunate. Like I grew up, on a 50-acre farm in an area that was pretty quiet, so as kids, we were always out in nature, right? And so you're with animals, and my mom had bees, and you're out making fences, and I remember making forts, and like, it was just kind of like, you'd go to the back 40, and then, when mom would ring the dinner bell, you'd come home. And so I was always kind of like connected with nature, and it wasn't until like I got older and kind of left home and lived in the city for a little bit that I was like, oh, like this isn't right for me. Like I don't belong in the city. So kind of moved back to the country, and there's the paleo diet and the primal diet and all these things, right? So as you start to explore these different, nutrition and lifestyle avenues, there's always like the talk about hunter-gatherers and this and that, and eat like your ancestors. And I just found out that I was just really, really passionate about like wild human beings. And by that, I mean like true hunter-gatherers that are basically the non-domesticated form of humans, right? And they live their lives like completely different than you or I do, right? And I'm not saying that this is good or bad, it's just a completely different way of life. And the more I like read into the anthropology of our prehistoric humans and stuff, I was like, wow, this is like a really fascinating way to live your life. And so what I do is I try to incorporate as many elements of that ancestral lifestyle as I can into my own life. And I should say that like there are still, hunter-gatherers today in the world, while very few left, like they still live that same life way. And so for me, that's like, it can mean a lot of things, right? It's like what I eat, my movement practices, Allison hates it, but I keep the house really cold. It's just like I want my body to adapt to all these different stressors. And yeah, and I mean it's to me it's so much more than just like diet and exercise. Like that is to me it's almost like a superficial level of like ancestral living, right? And so yeah, I mean I do as much wild food foraging as I can, a little bit of hunting, fishing, just camping, just being outside, walking barefoot outside, my relationships and my interaction with people. And yeah, it's just one of those things that it just clicks for me. That's like my one thing that I'm just absolutely obsessed with, and so yeah, I mean I incorporate as much of that into my life as possible. And and there's a lot of good takeaways there, and sometimes you can transform those into modern day English in a way, and kind of instill those values in clients as well too, right? And you know, it's funny, some people are like, oh, like, you know, that's great, but you know, I can't hunt and you know, catch my own meat and stuff. It's like, okay, yeah, I understand that, but it's like, you know, you can move more, you can walk more. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do just to incorporate these ancestral values.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, ancestral, if you're living ancestrally, that would take some research into sort of who your ancestors are as well, right? If you're going to be moving and feeding your body in a way that is similar to how you as an individual, your ancestors were doing things. So what type, I'm sure you've done some research, what type of research have you done into your ancestors and how they would have lived?
Yeah, so this is kind of a funny thing. So, you know, I've done like the 23andMe and Ancestry.com, and I mean, it's kind of through and through. It's like English, Irish, Scottish, with a little bit of, you know, Northern France. The funny thing though is that in a weird way, like that's my ancestry, but that is still like an agricultural people, right? So if I look at Scottish history, you know, that's still an agricultural society. And, you know, unfortunately, I mean, Europe has been populated for so many years that like we don't even have much like anthropological records of like true hunter-gatherers, right? Or even that bridge of when like humans started migrating out of Africa into Europe. So I don't really know my hunter-gatherer ancestry, right? So I kind of base it off of, you know, the peoples that we know of today, and I just kind of add my own blend to like, okay, cool. So this is the information we know of, you know, whether it's Native Americans or people indigenous to Brazil and Africa, where there's still some true hunter-gatherers left. And then I kind of fill in the blanks with my own theories onto what like that would look like in Northern Europe or Scotland or England.
Cool. Yeah, and I know, you know, I have some heritage that's Scandinavian, and through researching that heritage, I know that there was a time when, you know, the Vikings went over to the islands of Great Britain and Ireland, Scotland, and all that area. So, you know, they were a nomadic people, I'm pretty sure. So I'm sure that's in there as well for you. You've got some Viking nomadic, you know.
Absolutely. I think I had like 4 or 4.5% Neanderthal DNA, so that's what I'm rolling with.
I feel like that's the one that everybody wants, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
You do those such like, oh, I'm part Neanderthal, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. So ancestral living, really cool, and you sort of touched on it when you talk about it with your clients. You know, I'm not a hunter, not a gatherer. So I want to get into, you know, talking about your clients and you know, your business specifically. So Thrive Performance. I'd love to know where that name came from.
So I don't have a fancy story for it. Like, I'll be completely honest. I think, and I'm guilty of this to this day, but most people spend so much time like researching for the perfect thing, and instead of like just doing their like researching, right? And it's like it's almost like a form of procrastination. So I remember just like I went to the cafe and I'm like, you know, got the computer set up and I had a coffee and I just, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm just like researching names and like typing stuff down and this and that. And I think it was a video or a podcast, I can't remember, but Jonathan Goodman, who's got like great resources for trainers, he had like an article or something on like, you know, picking a business name. And he's like, just use your name. Like, it doesn't matter. Like this is going to change, right? Like, don't spend like 2 weeks trying to find the perfect name. So like me personally, like I'm fascinated with athletics, and like I love watching like the world's best athletes compete. So performance was really cool. And then Thrive, I was like, you know, I think most people are just surviving, and which is sad considering like the resources that most of us in the developed world have, right? So I didn't want people just to like survive anymore, like, you know, drinking coffee, getting home through work, and just doing the bare minimum. So I wanted people to thrive, and I was fascinated with performance, so I just jammed the two together, and it stuck.
I mean, that worked. It doesn't have to be a fancy story, but it has meaning to it, which is
yeah, a little bit of meaning, but otherwise it was like, no, I just need to get something on paper.
That's awesome. So when you started your personal training business, did Thrive Performance come before you started working at Freeform?
Yeah, totally. So I had done, you know, maybe for like a year, right? So yeah, I had done some in-home training, some outdoor training, a little bit of that here and there, and which was like okay, but I really need to just like dive in and like get into a gym. So yeah, it had existed beforehand, and again, I just kind of use it as like a social media handle. And I'm not very big on like personal stuff on social media. Like I was never really on Facebook. I was never really on Instagram, anything like that. But once the business started taking off, then I kind of just kept that, and the name looked good and looked semi-professional, and then just kind of kept rolling with it.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's it. And even if you're not really a social media person, like you said, you just sort of needed somewhere for clients to go, and
Yeah,
needed
absolutely.
the name for your business, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you, like, Freeform was the first gym that you ended up at? Yes.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Nice.
So my girlfriend Allison actually had worked there when she was going through university. So and like I hate I guess all the fake and phoniness associated with like the fitness industry, right? So like I had went through like the Good Life, Movati interviews, and I had got a couple job offers there. But I just knew that like if I was going into that system, it's just kind of very cookie cutter, you know, follow this template, you know, here's your sales targets for the week. And I just like, I had already had a pretty good job beforehand. So I wasn't in this to like, you know, I really need this job. Like, yes, I'll take the offer. Like I really wanted to make sure that like where I was going was going to be a good fit for me, because I didn't really want to sell out on any of my values. And so, yeah, no, I mean, Allison was great. She was like, listen, I worked here for, I don't know, 3-4 years. I can't remember how long. It was a significant amount of time. And she's like, I think you get along with the trainers. You know, they've got a little bit of a different vision than the rest of these big box style gyms. So I said, perfect. So I ended up applying, I think, for the Canada location, which is closer to home. And they were pretty full. And then I got an email from the Byward location. They're like, hey, like we need a trainer here. Are you willing to like, would this be okay for a commute? And I mean, I have no issue driving at all. So I said, yeah. And then, so that was the first foray into the gym.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember, you know, when I was a personal trainer, and I sort of had the same thing. It was this, you know, I don't really want to work for the big names, because it is just about sales, and you're just sort of like a cog in the machine. And so when I happened upon Freeform, it was like, okay, they really do let you come in and just bring who you are as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clients. And then they bring the clients to you, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
the intro package there really helps to just get the clients in and get you in front of more people, which is awesome. So, you know what, you have a lot going on. You have jiu-jitsu, and you have your own business that you're running. You personal train at Freeform as well. So how do you stay consistent? How do you sort of keep yourself at that same level of effort day in and day out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of this, there's just this internal drive, right? Like I don't really need like external motivation, I guess. So I really enjoy what I do, and you know, I've kind of got a plan laid out of where I want to go, and how much money I want to make, and where I want to live, and all of these things, right? So you always have to kind of go back to why you're doing it, and that kind of gives you the fuel you need to keep going, because as you know, like being a personal trainer, it's a grind. Like it is, like if you want to be successful at it, there's no, like it's not a part-time job here and there. Like you're all in, right? Because you're talking to clients after hours, you're sending them programs, you're emailing them, and even with this COVID thing, right? Like you're sending workouts to clients, even if you know they're not going to do them, you have to do it, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's a full-time gig no matter what you do. So for me, it's just like, it's always like going back to the dream, right? And you just got to keep working, and there are going to be days where you don't want to get up, but you got to do it, right? So, I mean, I guess I'm pretty lucky. Like I've had, like my mom is extremely hardworking. My stepdad, he's run a business since he was 15 and was quite successful at it. And so my work ethic was kind of instilled by them. And a lot of it is just like, you just got to keep going. Like you quit when the job is done. There was no, there's no like, okay, do a little here, do a little there. And I mean, they both worked a ton. And so I work a ton. I mimic what they did.
Nice. So it's always just, it's sort of been there from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I think I'm lucky because like I see some people who like just struggle with working a lot of hours, right? And especially if you want to get into a business like this, like you can't do it 40 hours a week. It's like, you got to be all in. And so I think I'm just lucky that like I had kind of role models like that growing up, that it was just like, no, you just keep working.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's almost a piece that's missing in some certifications. And I went to school for fitness and health promotion as well, and they talked about the idea of personal trainers being sort of like psychologists and all those things, but you really don't know until you start working that this is not a 40-hour a week type of job. You don't get to turn things off, and it can be incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
Because you invest so much of yourself into it.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. I think it's like you have these fantastic highs, and then there's some really low points too, right? Where it's just like, holy crap, you're like, it's 9 o'clock. I still have to get all my programs done for tomorrow. I got to do this. I got to email clients. Like that's tough. Like that's part of the game. But then when you have like a client hit a PR, or you have a client lose some weight, or like you have a client that's just like, oh my God, like I'm just not getting hurt anymore, just doing regular stuff. You're like, oh yeah, this is exactly why I'm in this.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that it sort of, leads me into my next question of, what have been some of the greatest obstacles for yourself that you have had to overcome, but also what's one of the greatest successes that you've experienced as a personal trainer?
Yeah, the greatest obstacles is like, probably like, it might sound a little bit weird, but probably like time management.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm really good at getting like a really good kind of baseline idea. Like I can think of concepts really, really well, but then putting them into action, I'm horrible with it, right? Like there's a million apps now to like standardize everything and get everything on time and do this and that. And it just like, I'm still very like kind of not like anti-technology, but like I don't use any of these devices to their full capability, right? And so what happens is like I try and organize stuff, and then by the time the day's over, I still have 3 hours of stuff to do, right? And I think the biggest thing as a trainer is like your time management is so crucial. And like especially if you're going to be doing social media, like I'll be good where I do 3 posts a day, and then after 3 days I don't have enough time in the day to like sit down and do this. So like for me, it's like time management, like 100%. Like that is definitely, and I still struggle with that now, right? So that I really need to focus on for sure. But in terms of like greatest success, like you mean like a specific incident or a specific story?
Yeah, it'd be great if you had a specific story for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I'm working with someone right now, and unfortunately, it's kind of hard to train for deadlifts via Skype. But we're working on a 3-plate deadlift, and she pulled 300 pounds before the lockdown at Christmas. And so like I think probably give us a week or 2 warm up, we'll take a look and get that warm back up. And she'll probably hit 3 plates in a few weeks, which is like, especially for a female lifter, that's a pretty sick lift. And we actually just briefly looked at some of the Canadian powerlifting numbers, and she's kind of at the low end for her weight class. So I mean, pretty sweet considering she has no powerlifting background before training at Freeform, right? And we've been working together for years, but so that's a pretty cool story. But I mean, I got tons of them, right? Like that's a cool story in terms of the PR, but honestly, I take great pride in just hearing clients say like, hey, like I feel strong, I feel fit, I have energy. Like that to me is huge, right? Because lifting heavy weights, I mean that's got a short window of time that you can do that safely and effectively. And you're not going to be setting PRs when you're 60 or 70, right? But the foundations that you lay in training, and can you move well, are you injury free, all of that stuff, there's no reason to see 50 and 60-year-old parents or grandparents like not be able to like play with their kids, or go for a hike without pain and all this kind of stuff. So I really take pride in those stories just as much as PRs or big weight loss goals or anything like that.
Yeah, it's just about allowing people to understand that they're still very capable. It doesn't really matter what age they're at. If you with the right type of coach and the right type of program, they're able to actually probably achieve a lot more than what they initially came into the gym.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Just to tie this into the ancestral living, we were watching a BBC documentary or something, and so they were filming these 2 guys, and they had a translator and they were kind of laughing, and the two guys were talking, and they're like, oh, like, you know, if we don't bring back honey, like our wives are going to like boot us out of the camp. So they're going through the bush and they find this tree that's, oh God, I can't remember how many feet. It was really high. And there was a bee's nest up there. And they had estimated these guys were between 50 and 55. And they just climbed the tree. Like, I mean, they made this little, you know, cordage from the bush, and they just scaled that tree all the way up, all the way down, zero issues. And I'm like, oh, like, this is weird. Like, you know, a 50-year-old in the wild can climb a tree to get honey. And, you know, most of us like have a hard time like getting out of bed without being sore, you know? And I was like, oh, okay, so there's a mix match here, right? And usually this is just from lack of movement, right? Like, once we leave high school, maybe you play university sports, but after that, like, that's it, you know, and we just don't move. And so even then it's not even fancy training. It's just like, you just stop moving your body, and that's compounded over decades and decades and decades. And then we kind of get into this position where everything hurts, and, you know, you can't train and you can't lift. And a lot of it's just because we stop moving.
Yeah. And I mean, I even find that, you know, if you're not playing sports, you're not sort of moving like you used to in high school, and then you try to get back into it, there is that, you know, few weeks where it is, you know, it is a bit of an ego check to be like,
absolutely.
Okay, you know, I can't move the way that I used to.
Yeah.
You know, which it's a good reminder for everybody who's taken the last year or so off. You know, they haven't been able to access the gym for any consistent amount of time. It's just that, you know, when we do get to reopen for a long period of time, hopefully next week, that it's, you know, you just, people need to like take time, you know, give yourself some time to get back into it. Enjoy taking things slowly again before you can dive right into
that's that's 100% right. Like, it's like, oh, you know, I used to bench 2 plates, you know, in college. It's like, okay, well, that was 20 years ago, so we're going to start with the bar, and then we'll add a little more and a little more. And this is the biggest thing, is like, you gotta go slow, especially with COVID. Like, not only have we not trained for, you know, some people haven't trained since, you know, the gyms closed in the beginning of the pandemic, but like, people are moving so little now, right? Like, it used to be you walk to work and then you walked out for lunch, and then now people they go from the couch to the home office, and so they don't even get the movement of getting up and walking around. And so yeah, like, if anything, now is probably even more important just to like start slow. Like, at this point in the game, like, it's better to leave the gym feeling like you could have done a little bit more weight than to overreach, and then now you're hurt and you got to take 2 weeks off to rest your back or whatever, you know? So
do you have like a plan or a mindset going back to the gym again, hopefully next week, you know, how you're going to approach training over the next few weeks, bringing people back in, and just how that's going to change their programming?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not going to be honest. Like, I find programming doesn't have to be that complicated. And unless someone like specifically wants some sort of fancy program with, you know, Bosu ball, bicep, backflips and stuff, like, there's always like a long-term plan. And sometimes you just have to, like, you can get back on exactly where you left off. And then other times, okay, we got to take a couple steps back and then we go from there. But, you know, like, clients are going to have different levels of commitment to their fitness. And I have some clients who they are never going to train unless they have me there in the gym pushing them through. And that really sucks, because, like, no matter, you know, you can try a Zoom workout, you can send them a workout, and it's like, it just doesn't get done, right? So for people like that, it's like, okay, cool. Like, we're just going to start over with body weight squats. And when you hit those sets for, you know, a week maybe, and they look good, then we'll add a little bit of weight and do a gauntlet squat or whatever. And then we keep moving forward. You know, and then there's some clients that are going to be more advanced that have been, you know, maybe they have home gyms and they've been training significantly, so we can just get right back to it. And then there's other clients where, you know, we might have to just do a week or two just to warm up and get the body used to lifting some heavy weights again. But yeah, it really depends on the client for sure. A few people we're going to have to regress a little bit in the program, but I mean, it's not a bad thing. I mean, people always, like, they come in and they're like, oh my God, like, before the pandemic, I was benching a plate and then now I'm back to 95 pounds. It's like, that doesn't matter. Like, it'll take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you're back right at it, you know? So I think people kind of get stressed out about seeing, like, the numbers disappear. But I mean, we're lifting weights not to get a number on the bar, right? We're lifting weights to, you know, feel better and move better and look better and blah, blah, blah. So I think a lot of people just need to, like, just kind of cool it for a sec and just, you know, maybe you have to regress a week or two, but after that, you're right back in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sort of plays on that idea that the human body is highly adaptable.
Oh,
You,
absolutely. Yeah.
you apply the right stress and it will adapt. And
Yeah.
there's all that science about, if they were lifting a plate a year ago,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
it's not going to take that long to get them back. And the numbers are also not the goal as well. It's
Yeah,
just about,
totally. Yeah.
allowing people to explore that adaptability of the body. That's what I always found so interesting. And when clients would just be like, wow, it's so cool. I never thought I'd be able to lift this much. I'm like, hey, you've been consistent. We've been progressively overloading you, like all those training principles. And here we are, it's as simple as that.
No. And I mean, listen, I think the adaptability part is actually really cool. I mean, of all the mammals on the planet, I mean, humans are the most adaptable, right? Like, we live on every continent, in every climate, every temperature. If you want to be a power lifter, if you train significantly, like, there will be changes in your spine that happen from lifting heavy weights over time, right? That will actually make you, maybe this is going to be like a crude analogy, but like maybe make you less flexible, right? Than someone who's a gymnast who has adaptations for being really good at manipulating their body that way, right? Or if you want to be a long distance runner, like, your body will change and get really good at whatever you decide to do with it. And then also goes to say, like, if you just sit on a couch all day long, your body will get really good at that, right? And there'll be adaptations that happen to make you better at sitting on a couch, right? Which usually makes us less fit and less mobile. But yeah, I mean, the adaptability of the human being is unbelievable.
Definitely. I mean, I keep saying, but encouraging, as the gyms hopefully start to open up again. We just have to just get moving again, and
yeah,
where all those aches and pains will go away. Just keep working at it, right? So I wanted to ask you about your certifications. Just touch on it quickly before we wrap things up. What are, because we're taking so many, what are some of the certifications or courses, mentors, podcasts that you really rely on for valuable information and have helped to shape your career as a personal trainer?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is like a staple for any trainer, is like, I think everything by Jonathan Goodman is like mandatory reading. I mean, the guy gives the books away half the time. Like, he's just like, pay the shipping and I'll send it to you for free, right? Like, so that stuff is really, really, really good. He's got an online trainer course, which, I mean, is great for online training, but honestly, it's like a business course for trainers, right? And a lot of trainers, they can never get the financial side of things right. And it kind of forces them out of the industry because, they owe the government tens of thousands of dollars and they just can't make it happen. So they leave, right? So the finance thing for a trainer is like, that's like number 2, is like, get your certs, but then after that, like, get an accountant, do everything correctly from the beginning, and it's going to save you a lot of headaches. So yeah, I mean, I've read every book Jonathan has. I had all his he had like a magazine for trainers a while back, every copy of those. Like, so that one is like definitely recommended for every single trainer. And then from there, like, you have to find out what your niche is. So I mean, again, I got a lot of like West Side Barbell stuff and C.H.E.K Institute stuff because I enjoy training, athletes and people who want to push hard. I also enjoy working with the older population who they're like, hey, I just want to move better and I don't want to feel pain. And I think that's also pretty cool to show someone who's 75, like, hey, you can actually do all of these things and not get hurt. And so that's pretty cool. And then again, like I had mentioned before, like the pre-postnatal training, I think is really good. A lot of trainers aren't comfortable working with women, especially when they're pregnant, because I mean, sure, there's like a liability issue there too, but it's also just like pretty intimidating. You're like, oh my God, like, okay, like, we're not, and then there's also this, like, once you're pregnant, you can't do anything, like, sit down. And so there's a lot of kind of weird myths out there that kind of make that niche a little bit hard to work with, but I really enjoy it. I mean, I think it's just pretty cool. To me, there's like nothing more empowering than showing a woman that, yeah, you can actually do all of these things. Yeah, maybe you have to make some modifications here and there, but, and even at the Byward location, I mean, we have a couple women who just gave birth just before the pandemic. And I mean, they were lifting weights 2 weeks before giving birth, right? So that's pretty cool. So I enjoy all of those things. And there's tons of little certs kind of here and there. But I think the biggest thing is you got to find what your niche is and then zero in on those certifications.
And again, the ancestral living, I mean, women were running around hunting, gathering, doing all of those things when they're pregnant. So
absolutely. And I mean, listen, you still see that in like other parts of the world, right? Where just like medicine isn't as available and infrastructure doesn't exist. And So yeah, there's some pretty tough women out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to do something towards the end of every episode that I do for this, and it's our rapid fire questions. So these are meant to be just quick things. Okay, so the first one, it's pretty classic question. What's something you know now that you wish you knew when you first started personal training?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, it's the finance stuff. It's just like, I don't think you realize the, like, what you can claim, what you can't claim. Like that finance side of things is so crucial, because it's really easy. Like, you can get away with it for a couple of years, but then it catches up. So if I had have known like how complex that stuff could have been in the beginning, I think I would have started that like right off the bat. Yeah, that's probably the first one there.
For sure. Okay, what's the first skill that you teach beginner clients?
The first skill, probably a squat.
Squat, yeah.
Yeah, like, and for no other reason than like, it is like the most basic human movement pattern, right? So again, like pre-industrial people, like that is like that's how you would sit at a campfire. That's how you would go to the bathroom. That's how like you would do all of these things, right? And so I don't even consider the squat like necessarily like a barbell squat. Like that I don't care about, right? It's just like, do you have enough like range of motion at the hips, knees, ankles to get into this position comfortably, right? And it's a pretty good predictor for like stuff like, colon cancer, bowel issues, hip and knee issues. And most people, again, like, you can see a kid 7, 8 years old, whatever, they're hanging out with their friends, they're in the bottom position of a squat with their heels on the floor. And again, the only reason that most adults can't do that is because you just stop doing it. And so to me, that's the first movement I teach. Sometimes people can't even do that, right? So then you do like a box squat, or you just do what you can. But 9 times out of 10, it's a squat.
Yeah, it really is. It is truly fundamental. And you always see trainers sharing videos of like how quickly a baby will just like drop down in a squat. And they're sort of like bouncing on their knees. I'm like, I don't know if my knees could do that fast, I think they might blow out if I drop down.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and our third question is, what is the most valuable coaching skill?
Okay, so I don't know if this is maybe a skill, but patience. Like, I mean, that is like it for sure. Like, you or I have a passion for fitness. So we're going to train and we're going to do things that like the average person could care less about, right? And so patience is the biggest one. Like, especially any of these compound movements, they take time to learn. And like, if you come into the gym and you've never done any of these movements, like, yeah, it's going to take you 6 to 12 months to get a really good squat. Like it is, right? And we want to like rush this process. And so then it's easy to do leg extensions or hamstring curls to like get around that to train the legs. But like just learning how to do a real proper squat or a real proper deadlift is going to be the most beneficial. And you gotta have patience, because like people are going to get frustrated. It's not going to feel good. There's going to be days where they come in and like you'd program squats and their knee is sore. So you can't, so the biggest thing for me is just patience. It just takes time, and you got to remember that like your clients have different goals and their passion for fitness might be for different reasons. And you just got to take your time. They'll get it, and eventually they'll love it, but it's just time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like the general public sort of runs on a different like fitness timeline, because we have all of these headlines that say 2 weeks to this and
it's awful.
1 week to this, blah blah blah. So they come into the gym, we're like, no, it's going to take 6 to 12 months for you to get a squat down, and they're like, but the magazines said I could do it different.
Those magazines are awful.
It really is. It is the biggest struggle of personal trainers is fighting back against
it's awful. Yeah, the marketing is so backwards, right? Like, and it's so weird that like, and don't get me wrong, like I'm a total free market capitalist guy. Like, people gotta they gotta make a living, but if you're gonna make a magazine and sell some phony headline, you also have to be open for people saying, no, this is like total BS and this doesn't actually work, right? And that's the problem, is that's what sells, right? It's like you go to, it's like it's like, oh, I lost 40 pounds in like 3 weeks, and it's like, or this supplement or that supplement, and it's always the basics, like, good food, sleep, rest, movement. Like there's no fancy stuff, and it just sucks that like so many people get sucked into these like over and over and over again.
Yeah. And even, to bring it to the personal trainer, so the business side of things, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were comparing sort of like that old style of the people who, you know, the rich get richer. You sort of start, if you start off with everything, chances are you'll probably get to the top. But then they give the example of somebody like Tim Ferriss, who, you know, was a bit of a mess in his 20s, but because he was consistent with his work, that's where he is now. You know?
Oh, absolutely. So, and that's the same thing. Yeah, same thing with exercise. Like just like, you know, I'm just going to use it again as a super general example, but like, okay, cool, get into the gym and like squat twice a week, and do that for like a year or 2 years or whatever, right? And it's just time. It's just time under the bar. You have to keep going, and like, you know, 10% of your workouts are going to be absolutely amazing. 10% are going to like absolutely suck. But the 80% is just like, you go in, you get the work done. You know, it doesn't have to be a PR. You just get the volume in, and yeah, it's just consistency.
There you go. That's it. Consistency is key, as they say. All right. Well, this has been awesome. I'm really glad that I brought you on for this very first episode of the Personal Trainers Who Care podcast. Thank you so much, Jessie. If people want to learn more about you, where can they go to find more about you?
Yeah, so Instagram is probably the best bet. That's where I'm most active. And then from there, I just kind of do the copy paste thing to Facebook and Twitter. So thrive.performance is my Instagram handle. And then, yeah, if you're in the Ottawa area and you want to work with me, the Byward location right on Dalhousie is where I train. And yeah, I mean, I've got a website as well, thriveperformance.ca. It's nothing fancy, more of a landing page than anything. All the content I put out is all on Instagram.
Okay. Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll be posting this in the next couple of days. And yeah, we'll look forward to doing the next episode. Thanks, Jessica.
Oh, me too. No, this was awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care.
Talk to you later.
All right, so that concludes our very first episode of the Personal Trainers Who Care podcast. All relevant links can be found in the description box below. And of course, if you want to learn more about freeform fitness or sign up for personal training with Jessie, you can head to freeformfitness.ca. And before you go, make sure that you like this video, subscribe, and tell your friends about it so that we can continue to create great health and fitness content for all of you. All right, see you in the next one.